Hey everybody, thank you for joining. We do have an update here, likely not the update that you were hoping to hear, but we do have an update, and that is that Republicans have reached the 218 vote threshold to take control of the House. This was just called about 10 minutes ago by Decision Desk HQ, and that was that I believe it was in Arizona's 6th congressional district that Juan Ciscomani won. So that is enough seats for Republicans to have secured control of the House. They will likely end with somewhere in the ballpark of 220 House members. So it's going to be maybe 221. So it's going to be a very narrow margin, and it's not going to look dissimilar to what we've seen for the last couple of years. I mean, this past election cycle, we saw Republicans with, I think, a 4-seat majority when they first came into office, and then that was whittled down to just a couple of seats here. But as of right now, it does look like, or it is confirmed, according to DDHQ, that Republicans will take control of the House. And again, their margin will expand. Right now, it's 209 to 218. There are a few seats left to be called. I want to say maybe about eight or nine, I believe, House seats left to be called. So Republicans will enter office with unified control of government. They will have the White House, where Donald Trump won with, I believe, 312 electoral votes. They'll have the Senate, and I believe that is right now at, let's see, we have that right here. The Senate right now is at 52. Pennsylvania has not been called yet, but Dave McCormick has what looks like a relatively insurmountable lead, but they're still counting votes. So I don't want to count each one, but if I had to put money on one, I would say it's probably looking more likely that it'll be Dave McCormick over Bob Casey. So that would push Republicans up to 53 electoral votes, and I think that is it. Yeah, it would be 53 to 47. So, and then, of course, the House, as I showed you just now, we're looking at about 218 to 209. So, again, Republicans will enter office here with unified control of government, which means that they'll be able to push through, they'll be able to push through a lot of what they seek to push through. But remember, if they want to pass any legislation, that still has to reach that 60-vote threshold in the Senate. So unless they eliminate the filibuster, which I don't think they'll do, because that would open up Pandora's box for Democrats to actually pass legislation. And Democrats can pass a lot more legislation than Republicans want to pass. Republicans don't really want to pass legislation. They want to preserve the status quo and lower taxes, which they can do with 51 votes, and confirm judges, which they can do with 51 votes. But once you get into a situation where you eliminate the filibuster, then we can start passing legislation with 51 votes. And they don't really want to do that because, remember, the legislation as it stands right now actually benefits them. There are lax gun safety laws that benefits them. There's no law codifying Roe that benefits them. There's no Voting Rights Act that benefits them. So in an environment where they don't have to pass any laws, that actually benefits Republicans. They would be happy if they never had to pass laws, could just keep chipping away at tax rates, and in fact use the budgeting process to shrink budgets to certain departments that they don't want. That's what I presume they'll do to a lot of these 3-letter agencies that they're hostile to, like the DOJ and the FBI and the EPA and the IRS and the FCC. So the Department of Education, DOE, like they will starve funding to these organizations, or these agencies rather, in an effort to make them less powerful. And they can do that with the purse strings in Congress, right? So I do think that they'll be less inclined to prevent to eliminate the filibuster, but I do think they'll still be able to accomplish a lot of their legislative goals just by virtue of the fact that they have unified control of government. So again, not the greatest update that I come to you with, but then again, it's not been great for a couple of days, and so I feel like it's just kind of par for the course at this point. I am seeing people say it's time to go get drunk. I say more power to you. I almost said it was the weekend, but it's Monday. So you can still get drunk if you want to, but unfortunately, there is no good news from this House update here. So let's see, I'm getting some questions. With full control of the House, Senate, and presidency, could they pass a national ban on abortion as law? So this fits into what I was saying before. If they were to pass any legislation, they would need to eliminate the filibuster. But right now in the Senate, you need to reach a 60-vote threshold. And unless you reach that 60-vote threshold, you can get laws out of the House, but you can't get them out of the Senate. So House requires a simple majority of votes to pass the House, but then when you get into the Senate, you have to reach that 60-vote threshold. That is the filibuster. Once you overcome that, then it goes to the president's desk to sign it. But right now the filibuster is intact. Again, Republicans can seek to eliminate the filibuster, but think about what that would mean for Democrats taking control. Now all of a sudden you have a 51-vote threshold and Democrats take control of the Senate. Likely not in 2026, but maybe in 2028 when the map is more favorable. And then all of a sudden, national voter registration, a law prohibiting gerrymandering across the country, a law codifying abortion rights across the country, a law banning bump stocks or assault rifles. So Republicans, I think, will do everything in their power to actually preserve the filibuster so that Democrats can't pass legislation. I'm getting the question, what are my thoughts on Trump refusing to leave at the end of his term? I think it's a real possibility. Look, this is what I say, anything is metaphysically possible, right? But I think that there's going to be plenty to worry about without jumping to conclusions about what could happen. If we get to, look, again, like we know him, it certainly is possible, but the last thing I want to do is kind of conjure up things that we don't, that aren't immediately in front of us when there are things that are immediately in front of us. Like we know, for example, that Donald Trump is seeking to tap Lee Zeldin to lead the EPA, and he's got a 14% rating from the League of Conservation Voters. So like this guy is hostile to, again, and we're going to see this over and over. This is somebody who is hostile to the mission of the very agency that he's going to lead. And so that's something that we can actually talk about, as opposed to like Donald Trump not leaving, refusing to leave 4 years from now. We'll get to that point. Hopefully we don't, but we'll get to the point where that's going to be either in the zeitgeist or not. But there's going to be plenty to talk about that is immediately in front of us in the meantime. And by the way, if you have questions, just make sure to tag my name so I can see them, because the chat is there's a lot happening in the chat. So I do want to make sure that I can read the questions when you have them. Will Republicans expand the Supreme Court to 13? I don't know. I mean, do they need to right now? I think if they do, look, they've got a 6-3 conservative court. We are almost certain to see Justice Thomas and Justice Alito, two hard right justices, step down because they're both in their 70s. They're 74 and 76. They will likely step down and get replaced by people just as ideologically conservative as they are, but who are 40 years old. And that will mean they have a highly entrenched 6-3 conservative court. If something happens to Sonia Sotomayor, she's 70, then you might be looking at a 7-2 conservative Supreme Court. So in both of these scenarios, I don't know that they need to open up the Pandora's box that would be expanding the court, because if they do that, it'll be that much easier for Democrats to come in and say, fuck it, let's just do 21 people on the Supreme Court and make sure that we tilt the balance in our favor. I think that they're fine. They've got what they need with this 6-3 conservative court. Doesn't matter if you win. It doesn't matter if you win 6-3 or 5-4, as long as you win. So I think that right now, with the margin they have, there's not really that many 5-4 decisions that are being handed down. It's a lot of 6-3 decisions where Republicans are operating in lockstep. How long do you think it will take for Latinos and others to realize that the Orange Goblin isn't who they thought they voted for? I mean, this is the job of what I do, right? This is now we have to move forward and make sure that people know that what the gas prices are now, what the food prices are now, what the cost of goods is now, what the cost of utilities are now, what the cost of gas is right now, and Republicans will largely, it really doesn't matter what Trump said he would do and what the actual reality is, because they'll find a way to spin it. Remember, Trump came into office promising 3,000 miles of new wall. He built 52. He built 52 miles of wall. But when you turn on Fox News and listen to like Greg Gutfeld talk about it, he never hits Trump for not doing what he said he would do. He just finds a way to spin it, or just straight up lies. And so the onus is going to be on progressive media, or just any media entity that deigns to tell the truth, to make sure that people know, okay, here's what you were promised. Are they going to be able to do it? Are they going to be able to do it when they impose tariffs that just raise the cost of goods everywhere? Are they going to do it when, with a government that's completely non-functional? Are they going to be able to do it with a government that's focused on deporting people who pay billions and billions and billions of dollars into this country without deriving any benefit from that money? Remember, undocumented immigrants pay billions of dollars into the system. They don't get any money back. They're not able to participate in Social Security or Medicare. So that's going to hurt the economy. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen. But our job is to hold the administration accountable and explain what's happening versus what they promised would happen. So I'm getting the message, and I might have missed what this was in relation to, but her campaign, which I'm assuming means Kamala's, made an announcement saying any donations to the campaign website will be split between the counting battles of the House and Senate, and now including the contest of the seat for president. Look, I haven't heard any of the people that I look to for information who know what's going on. This is like the Mark Eliases of the world, people who, of course, if there was any legitimate basis for doubting the election results, I haven't heard anything from them to suggest that that the results for the presidential election are illegitimate. And so I would love to be able to sit here and say there are legitimate concerns of fraud in X, Y, and Z state, but I haven't seen any. And so the last thing I want to do, while it would be nice if it was real, the last thing I want to do is convey any inaccurate information. And so I would not waste energy. I'm just telling you that the honest truth is I would not waste energy focusing on anybody who says that, there are plans for a recount or there's some semblance of fraud. Again, the people who, the people who I've followed for this information would love nothing more than to see Democrats win. And if there was any legitimate basis to see Democrats win, they would highlight it in an instant. Faster than you can pass go, faster than you can collect $200. The fact that I haven't seen that information from those people tells me that, that sad as it may be, that there's no basis for any claims of fraud. And I know, look, it would be easy for me to sit here and say, like, yeah, I think something doesn't seem right, and tell people what they want to hear. And if you've watched my videos and watched my streams for the last God knows how many years, you know that I would want to see the same thing too. I dedicated my life to making sure that Republicans lose because I don't agree with their political ideology. The fact that, again, like I would love to be able to do that, but I think that it's more important right now to be honest than it is to just kind of give people a shot of whatever, whatever kind of they want to hear. It's not really how I operate. Do I think instead of legislation, everything is going to happen via executive order? Probably, because again, for any legislation to be passed, you would need 60 votes in the Senate, and I don't think that we are going to see that. Is it possible for them to get rid of Social Security? I think that they may make a play to privatize Social Security. So I would caution against against saying like, oh, Social Security is going away. But that doesn't mean they can't try to privatize Social Security. And that's been something that they've sought to do. But remember, there are midterm elections happening in less than 2 years. And remember what happened between 2020 and 2022, Dobbs was overturned, Roe was overturned, and in 2022, Democrats won the House by the biggest margin in modern American history. And so they know that if they privatize a program like Social Security, which is one of, if not the most popular programs in the country, likely more popular or as popular as Roe was, then they're going to face voters in midterms. And for them to be able to stand up this program is going to take time, and that time will come dangerously close to when there's another election. So they do it at their own risk is all I could say. I'm not going to say that they won't try because they may, but but who knows? So I'm getting the question. I've heard 2 times now that I've urged Sonia Sotomayor to leave the Supreme Court, but that doesn't make sense because she's not close to 80 like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was when Obama tried to get her to leave. Am I missing something? Yeah, I think that we don't know the next time that Democrats will have control of the House and the Senate. The Senate map for Democrats next cycle is not good. Democrats won't retake the Senate next cycle. So Trump will have a Republican Senate for the entirety of his presidency. I'm going to show you what I mean. So let's see where, for example, there are vulnerable seats up. Right now, everything on the screen, Democrats will be defending Georgia, a state that we just lost. So that is a possible pickup opportunity for Republicans. Other swing seats, Maine, Susan Collins, a possible pickup for Democrats, but this is somebody who has won every race since 1996 and even survived the 2020 election when Trump was repudiated and when Democrats got full control of government. So that's a pickup opportunity, but not a great one. Democrats are going to be defending Gary Peters in Michigan, his seat in Michigan, which Trump just won Michigan. So a pickup opportunity for Republicans. I guess you can look at Nebraska as a pickup opportunity for Democrats, but not a good one. Democrats are going to be defending a Democratic seat in New Hampshire. Republicans are defending North Carolina, which is a seat that Trump won. And I believe that's about it. So, Texas. But again, this is a seat that Democrats haven't been able to pick up, since the 90s, I believe. So overall, not a great map for Democrats in terms of pickup opportunities here. So we won't be able to get the Senate, or it's highly unlikely, unless some cataclysmic event happens, that we'll be able to get the Senate. So now we're looking, if we want Sonia Sotomayor as she's continuing to age, now we're looking at best case scenario 2028. So that's 4 years from now. Now she's 74 years old. And what if a Republican wins? What if J.D. Vance runs and wins? Then what I'm saying is we don't know the next time that we'll have the opportunity with a president in the White House and with Democratic control of the Senate to be able to replace somebody. And we have control of the White House and the Senate right now. And so that was the argument that I'm making with Sonia Sotomayor. It's not the fact that she's 70 now. It's the fact that where are we going to be when she is 80? And we have just lived an experience where we, kind of deferred to the decision making of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she didn't make it out of office. And now who is that taken by? Amy Coney Barrett is in that seat. And so we know what can happen because we've just lived what can happen. With that said, she said that she's not stepping down. And so I think that really kind of just that's pretty much it at that point. So is there any reason to have hope? I'm trying my hardest not to be fatalistic. That's a good question. And yes, there is reason to have hope. And that is that Donald Trump won in 2016, and within 2 years, Democrats won the House again by the biggest margin in modern American history, 41 seat swing to the left. when people are reminded or shown what, well, I guess reminded in this case, what Donald Trump's chaotic governing style looks like. And shortly after that, in the next election, Democrats won the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so there is a backlash, a noted backlash, a proven backlash to whenever Donald Trump comes into office. I think the Republicans are very wrongly thinking that this election is a reflection of how much of a mandate Trump has and how popular he was. But in fact, Trump won by the same margin that he lost by in 2020. He had 74 million votes. The problem here was on the Democratic side. This wasn't some big mandate for Trump. This was just a failure of Democrats to turn out so many voters because they didn't feel inspired and their prices were high and they didn't feel that Democrats were taking these concerns and these pains seriously. And so, again, this isn't like some massive reshaping of the electorate. I think this is just the fact that there wasn't enough of a reason to get people to choose to go to the ballot box over staying at home on their couch. And so, but they're going to be reminded of what it's like when, and so the point of me saying that is that Trump is not some massively popular figure, like this hugely popular figure who has some giant mandate to lead. He's just as unpopular as he was before. It's just that we couldn't turn out people on our side. And so come 2026 and 2028, that electorate, that coalition is there. It exists in this country. There are people who came out 81 million strong to vote against Trump the first time when he was in office and pulled all the chaotic stunts that he pulled, and he's going to do it again, and that coalition of people will be there. They weren't activated this cycle, but they exist. We have the numbers in this country to defeat him. It's just a matter of making sure that we can try to level the playing field in terms of the media and also selling our message and holding the Trump administration accountable for what they do and what they don't do. So the reason for hope is that Trump didn't score some like huge windfall of people in this country. He is as popular and also therefore as unpopular as he was before. It's just that Democrats' coalition didn't turn out. But that coalition, again, it exists. It is there. It's not been activated, but it's there. And if we get our messaging right, and if we prove to the American people that we're going to be the party that focuses on workers and economic populism and all of the things that are popular in this country, then we have the numbers to win. And so that's the reason, that's the principal reason for hope here. I know that right now in the lead up to what will be a chaotic and nightmarish Trump administration, all hope feels lost. But in the same way that we got through 2016 and then got to 2018, and there was a light at the end of that tunnel. And then we got from 2018 to where we already had a bulwark against Trump's worst impulses in the House and got to 2020 and then flipped full control of government. We can do that again here. And we will do that again here. Because remember, a lot of people didn't remember about the chaos that surrounded Trump during his presidency because we have a short attention span. They listened to Fox News' revisionist history about how great Trump's presidency was, as if we weren't burying Americans in mass graves and sending nurses to work in garbage bags, or they were too young and didn't know what it was like when, these are kids that are 18, 19, 20 years old now who were 10 or 12 when Donald Trump was president. But they'll know it now. In the same way that they were luckily able to avoid it when they were kids, they'll be able to see it now when they're 19, 20, 21, 22. So he will push people away. He will come into office with his approval at the highest point that it will be, and it will go down from there, because that's what happens with Donald Trump. He is not capable of maintaining any degree of high approval once people actually get to know who the guy is. So that's my reason to hope, and I truly, to my core, believe in it. And it's just going to take a little bit of time to get through this difficult part right now. Just a quick note for people watching right now, and I try to mention this in all of my streams, but I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, and I don't put my content behind a paywall. So if you want to support me, if you could just follow my channel, that is the best way to do so, and that's right on the main screen of my channel. Are there any Republicans who aren't on Trump's side with the Senate or House that are not on board with his agenda? So that's a good question, and I believe there is one person in the House who voted for the January 6th commission. I believe, don't quote me on that. In any case, the broader answer to your question is no. There will be no bulwark against the Trump presidency within his conference in the House or within the Republican Senate caucus. So I would not anticipate any type of dissent within the party. I think at this point, it's pretty clear what the Republican Party is and the extent to which it's just decided to hitch its collective wagon onto Trump. Do I think my Spanish language outreach helped? Do you think shows like The Bulwark should follow suit? Look, I wouldn't do my Spanish YouTube channel if I didn't think that it was helpful in some way. I do think every bit helps. I'm one guy who, is in every piece of content that I produce. And so I can't just sit there all day and pump out, 40 pieces of content like a news network does. But I translate everything I do into Spanish, and I have a Spanish YouTube channel that reaches a few million people. And in an election where these things are won and lost on the margins, I think it's important to do. It's hard to say because we lost ground with Latinos. I think I would like to see everybody do what I do with regard to Spanish outreach. I think that my content is a drop in the bucket, but I think that if everybody were to make a concerted effort to do outreach to Spanish speakers in this country, that it would inherit. I mean, it can't hurt. It can only help. And I see so few people doing it that the fact that my channel is one of the only ones on the left to actually translate the content into Spanish, I think is a condemnation of the media environment that we're in right now. And it's no surprise, really, that we're losing Hispanics at the rate that Democrats are. Can Trump amend the Constitution that only allows 2 terms, which would give him another term? No, to be able to amend the Constitution, there's some really heavy duty rules. I think you need support of 2/3 of the states in this country, it's not going to happen. So I would not worry about any amendment of the Constitution happening. Okay, now, who do I hope runs for president in 2028? I want someone like Andy Bashir. And I'm seeing another thing in the chat. AOC should run for president. A lot of people like her. It never ends. It never ends. Here's what I'll say. We can pretend that we know what the political environment is going to look like 4 years from now. We can pretend we know what the political environment is going to look like 6 months from now. Let me remind you that if I told any of you in December of 2019 that we would be within 3 months trying to find toilet paper in grocery stores and washing bananas when they came into the house and wearing masks, surgical masks, everywhere we went, I don't think anybody would have believed me. And if I had told you in June of 2020 that within 3 months we would be rooting for some guy named Tim Walz to be the next vice president of the United States and that we're supposed to know who that is, I also don't think you would have believed me. So there is no way to even come close to being able to accurately predict what the political environment is going to look like 6 months from now, much less 4 years from now. But to humor your question, and because I want to give you a straight answer, if I had to guess, I would say 2 things. I would say I don't know that the Democrats would be willing to. I think that there's probably going to be a reversion to some guy, like a man, a male, to run for president, because I think that they will probably get spooked over the fact that Hillary Clinton lost and Kamala Harris lost. Which is not to say that Gretchen Whitmer wouldn't make a run or that AOC wouldn't make a run, but this is just my gut reaction, gut instinct here. And if I had to pick, I mean, just judging from the people we have in front of us, the obvious names that pop out are Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, and I think maybe Wes Moore from Maryland. In terms of the bench, that's probably what I would presume. But look, 4 years before Obama came onto the scene, I don't think anybody knew who Obama was. So we may not know who the next presidential nominee for our party is. That's the reality of it. We may have somebody completely new who's not even on the scene whatsoever, and that might not be a bad thing either. So we'll see what happens on that front. Watch it be Mark Cuban. Something tells me if you want to drive home the economically populist message, it's probably not going to be a billionaire. I don't think, I don't think that that's what we're going to see. But stranger things have happened. Who do I think Republicans are going to get after behind Trump in 2028? I presume the obvious answer here is J.D. Vance. That's what I presume is going to happen. But that's not to say that Ron DeSantis won't try to resurrect his effort to become the next president for the Republicans either. Okay, here's a good question. Do I think that Democrats in this election will move more center-right and not learn from their mistakes, or do I think there's a chance they can move more to the left and turn out the left base? This is the perpetual question. This is the never-ending question here as far as what the Democratic Party does, and it's only a question that we have to contend with because the Republican tent is so narrow and so homogenous that they don't ever have to worry about. I mean, at this point, the Trump team has won, and the Never Trumpers are out of the coalition, and it doesn't matter. So they don't have to worry about are we going to actually be fiscally conservative, or are we going to back the guy who added $7.8 trillion to the debt? Are we going to be family values, or are we going to back the guy who has 34 felony counts related to an affair he had while his wife was at home with their infant son? So it doesn't really matter for the Republicans because they have no scruples and they will just back a guy even though all of his positions undermine all of that party's longtime stated positions. But the Democrats have a broad tent. And so do I think that they're going to move more center-right and not learn from their mistakes, or do you think there's a chance they can move left and try to turn out the base? Moving one way or the other is going to be inherently exclusionary. So there's no right answer here because remember, if you go left, you're going to push out, you're going to leave behind the Joe Manchin wing of the party. If you go right, then you leave out the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. I think that it's not necessarily you don't necessarily have to do that. I think we just have to focus our message on working class people and the economy, and then it doesn't really matter about moving right or moving left. I don't think that we need to do the thing that Kamala Harris did where she talks about guns and tries to frame us as some party on the second pro Second Amendment party. I think we've lost that branding war anyway, and so why bother trying to outdo them on Second Amendment stuff? So and at the same time, I think that we have to understand that there are limitations to what we should do, knowing that look, America is largely a center. Well, it depends. I mean, you can't look at an election like this and say America's a center-left country, because they've just elected Donald Trump a second time. So I think we just have to be smart about the battles that we pick. Is the next election going to be a referendum on Medicare for all? Probably not. But at the same time, I don't think that means we have to go out there and say I'm going to shoot an intruder whenever they come into the house. I don't think we need to do that pandering either. I think we just need to focus on really driving home a message of economic populism and workers' rights, which is, by the way, what the party stands for anyway. It's just that we don't talk about it enough. And I think we could probably look, and I'm talking like this is myself as well, because I'm guilty of this more than anybody, but it could be less talking about issues of democracy, and because that's more nebulous to some people, and focus, just make sure our message is on point. Workers and the economy and our personal finances and the cost of goods, which is what we're doing. I mean, when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, that brought down the cost of healthcare. It capped the cost for out-of-pocket costs, $2,000 a month. It lowered the cost of insulin and inhalers to $35. It allowed the government to negotiate lower drug prices, which brought those costs down. We eliminated junk fees at banks. We made it so that airlines have to do automatic refunds for canceled flights. All of those are pro-middle class, pro-workers, pro-economy stuff, and we should be highlighting that stuff over and over and over. And that is what we're doing now. So it doesn't mean we have to change the direction of the party. Maybe it just means we change the messaging of the party so that it's more in line with what the country more broadly wants to hear. And yes, we did it. And yes, we tried to make that pitch. And for a lot of the country, they didn't hear it because they're listening to right-wing media, or they're listening to alternative media that isn't going to talk about the fact that Kamala Harris's campaign was focused on giving first-time homebuyers $25,000, or giving small business owners $50,000, or building new rental units, 3 million new rental units, so it would keep the cost of rent down, or holding corporate landlords accountable for colluding to keep rent prices high, or that kind of stuff. A lot of people didn't hear about that stuff, and instead they just heard commercials about how she wants to give trans inmates gender reassignment surgeries, because that's what right-wing media was pushing. So we have to figure out a way to A, focus our message more so that people who are listening can hear it, and B, be able to counter the disinformation that's coming out of the right-wing media ecosystem, because in large part that drowns out any message that we want to send anyway. There's a ton of suggestions that people are throwing at the Democrats that they're already doing, which is right. This tells me that they have a problem breaking through. Do I agree? And how does that happen? Yes, I think that is largely what it is. I mean, I just named a bunch of things that Kamala Harris announced that Donald Trump couldn't rival. I mean, the only policy platform he was ever asked about was a child care proposal that one time he went on a 2-minute rant where he didn't make any sense and didn't say, and it was just a collection of incomprehensible words, like errant synapses firing in his brain and words falling out of his face. And meanwhile, like I said, Kamala had housing policy plans, economic policy plans, small business plans, marijuana legalization plans. There were policy plans. It's just a matter of people not actually having the opportunity to hear them. And so how do we make sure that it breaks through? We have to be able to contend with the right-wing media ecosystem. Remember, this thing spreads from Fox and Friends at 5 o'clock in the morning to, you have got podcasts, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Daily Wire, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly. You've got Rumble, you've got YouTube, which they dominate on. You've got Facebook, which they dominate on. You've got TikTok, which they've dominated on. You've got AM radio. So conservatives completely dominate on media. And so this next couple of years is going to be about building up progressive media, which seems like a good spot for me to shamelessly plug this channel that you're watching on right now. If you're not yet following or subscribing, please do so. But that's what Democrats need to do over these next 2 years. It has got to be a concerted effort to build up a left-wing media ecosystem that can rival what we have on the right, which doesn't mean lie, do what Republicans do and lie shamelessly, or pretend that, a campaign that doesn't say anything about trans rights is focused on gender reassignment surgeries in prison, but just in terms of being able to get the message out. When I turn on my YouTube shorts, for example, I'm immediately fed Theo Von and Joe Rogan, because they see that I'm a mid-30-year-old guy, and that's the kind of content most of my demographic watches. But it shouldn't be like that, and that's because there's nothing there's nothing on the other side. There's nothing to confront that stuff. So that's what you're automatically served. And so we need to figure out ways to continue bolstering the left-wing media ecosystem, whether it's not even politics directly, but even political adjacent content that can serve as a gateway to progressive ideology. I think that's going to be important, and that's what I'm going to be focused on doing for the next couple of years here. I hear that people that voted are saying their votes were not counted. Is there evidence votes have been lost and not counted? I'm going to ask folks, I've heard this too, and I know that it's obviously a big thing on TikTok. So I'm going to find out more before I answer that question because I want it to be accurate. But I hear you, and I know that it's a thing, and I'm going to wait to find out more before I can answer that question in particular. But I've heard it numerous times. I see it obviously on my TikTok algorithm, and stand by. What are the chances that the Electoral College will receive an overhaul? I don't think the numbers have been adjusted in quite some time, though I might be wrong. So the Electoral College numbers were just changed pending the 2020 census. So there was just a reapportionment of electoral votes that happened in this election cycle. For example, if we look at the presidential map, do they have the electoral votes here? They do not. But I can say, for example, that California has 54 electoral votes. In the previous decade cycle, it had 55. So we already know that the electoral votes have been changed. And in fact, judging by the way the population is moving, look, we needed the blue wall and to get us to exactly 270. If California loses one more electoral vote, which it may very well do in the next decade, and Texas continues to grow, or Florida continues to grow, then we also need to take into account that our path to victory in the Electoral College changes as well. So one hopeful prospect for overhaul, and this election might give lend some credence to that, is that if you look at the popular vote, 71.9 million versus 75 million, that might give Republicans a permission structure to say, let's adopt the national popular vote interstate compact, where it's just whoever wins the most votes wins the presidency. And that would be great. Even though Trump won using the national popular vote, it's more democratic. And I think we can activate a lot more voters who know that their votes don't even count if you vote from California, for example. Would the spread have been better for Trump with the 2010 census? I believe it would have been worse because California had more electoral votes there. There's been a lot of movement into the Sunbelt states. So I think that it would actually have been worse. How many safeguards are there to keep Trump in line, and how many votes in the Senate does it take for Trump to enable the Alien Enemies Act of 1798? So if it's law already, then he doesn't need to enable it. It's already law, and he can just invoke it. How many safeguards are there to keep Trump in line? There is the U.S. government, including the Republicans' willingness to actually abide by the U.S. Constitution. That's one safeguard. However closely they want to respect it remains to be seen, but that is a safeguard. And there's also the fact that if he wants to pass any legislation, you need 60 votes in the Senate. So there likely won't be the passage of a lot of legislation happening in the next 2 years or 4 years, so long as Republicans only have 50, probably 53 seats in the Senate. But we're probably looking at him using either existing laws or executive orders anyway. Is there a chance, however small it may be, that a true third or dare I say fourth party emerges, whether that be to the left or the right? It's a good question. I would say it's unlikely, because if you think about it, the first party to splinter in hopes that there will be like a third party born out of it will deprive themselves of any semblance of political power and basically just give carte blanche to the other party to take control. So if the Democrats splinter into, blue dog Democrats and the progressive left, then Republicans are just going to win out at that point. And it's just Trump's Republican Party that just wins all the seats, because now you've split the Democratic Party into two halves. And that's not to say that it's not a virtuous venture, but the fact is that we do have a two-party system here, and I think the first party, again, to signal that they're going to try to break off to gain some political power that's more ideologically pure, it's going to be such a moot exercise, because they're going to have no power. Republicans are going to have it all, and then that's the farthest thing from progress. Like if the progressives break off from the Democrats, then far from having like milquetoast Democratic control or milquetoast Democratic governance, now they have full-blown hard right governance, and that's not better. And by the way, if anybody's on Blue Sky, obviously Blue Sky is emerging as a big replacement or alternative to Twitter now that Elon Musk has turned it into a full-bore hell site. So I'm on Blue Sky. You can follow me there if you'd like. Oh, I think I can maybe put a link. I don't know how to put a link. I don't remember what my link is, but it doesn't matter. Oh, okay, there we go. Let me pin this right here in the chat. Do I think more pro-democracy podcasters will sprout following this election? Yes, I do. I think that it is so incumbent on our side to nurture left-wing media figures, and I absolutely think that's going to happen. I have some projects in the works, so if you want to stay on top of them, follow my stuff. But I have projects in the works that I think are going to be useful. And look, started streaming on Twitch the day after the election or the day of the election. So I'm already trying to figure out like where I can be most useful, how to find people where they are. I have one show in the works, actually 2 shows in the works that I think are going to be helpful in terms of a little bit of a rebrand that I think is going to be more targeted to the audience that I think Democrats need to gain. For those who are just tuning in, because I know we've been going for almost an hour now, we unfortunately have lost the House. Just want to go to this House race real quick. Decision Desk HQ called the final race that we were waiting on, which was Arizona's, I believe, 6th congressional district. Here it is. Juan Ciscomani defeated Kirsten Engel. So that race has been called, and with it, Republicans have taken control of the House. So they will enter this January with full unified control of government, House, Senate, and White House. For those asking if I'm going to stay on YouTube, yes, absolutely, of course. In terms of, I'm also being asked about Gallego and Lake. I don't know if they've called it, but I would not. Yep, they have called it. Ruben Gallego has defeated Kari Lake, yes. Am I going to stay on Twitter? I will probably stay on Twitter only because I think that the lesson we have to take out of this election cannot be to avoid platforms where people who disagree with us are on. If we cede that ground to the right because we're not happy with how they are performing there, then I think that we can't be surprised if people aren't hearing our perspective. So I'm of the mind right now that it's a process of addition, not subtraction. So moving over to Blue Sky, but I think it's important to stay on Twitter at least until it gets unusable. And I also I go on Piers Morgan's show when I have the opportunity. I go on other shows when I have the opportunity. I think our agenda is better. I think that history is with us. I think the vast majority of Americans are with us. And we're on the right side of history. And so I have no problem debating or arguing my beliefs. I think the more important thing is just to get in front of people who are open and receptive to actually hearing it. What are my thoughts on Michelle Obama running in 2028? I read somewhere that Joe Rogan said she would win in a landslide. I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say that she would not do it. I think that Michelle Obama has been pretty outspoken in terms of her disdain for politics, and so I wouldn't put money on it. But again, as I said earlier in this broadcast, anything can happen, and I think the only thing that would be I think it would be unsurprising for us to be surprised, if I could say it that way. Hey, bud, come here. I have a dog here that might want to join. Come here. All right. We do have my child here. Okay. Guest host today only. Here we go. Given that Bob Casey lost in Pennsylvania, I think Josh Shapiro should run for Senate in 2030. Look, Josh Shapiro, we have a bench of people who I think are going to be relevant in the coming years. And so it'll be the Josh Shapiros of the world. It will be Gretchen Whitmer. It will be Pete Buttigieg. We do have a young bench, and Wes Moore. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of those people coming, in the coming weeks here. In the coming years here. The dog's name, by the way, is Aston. 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 And he is never more than 1 foot away from me, which is too far. So for people looking at this map and wondering why Oregon is gray, this is the Senate result. So Oregon didn't have a Senate election in this cycle. All right, let's do one more question here. Here's, I think, an important question, and I do want to pose this here. Do we need a TV or movie star or a musician to run for president in 2028? It's actually an interesting question because I think, if anything, this election cycle has actually shown us that those people, like Hollywood, actually has very little impact on these elections. And I think in an election cycle, especially where Democrats had trouble relating to regular people, working class people, it probably doesn't send the best message when our main messengers are Oprah and Beyonce. So I think that moving forward, it's going to not really matter like how many celebrities and A-list stars we can trot up there, because really at the end of the day, the people who we've lost are people for whom a celebrity endorsement actually has the opposite effect. Like, these are people who did have, economic anxiety, and I don't mean economic anxiety in the same way that Republicans who voted for Trump have economic anxiety, which looks an awful lot like racism. But for the people who we did lose, because there is economic anxiety as the result of inflation, I think that when Democrats trot out millionaire TV stars, that might actually, not send the message that we are a party that they can relate with. And so, far from running a movie star or a TV star or a musician, I think that Democrats should probably rethink the extent to which we trot them out and use these endorsements as like a political advantage. That's just what I think. I think we're going to probably see folks on the campaign trail in the next cycles who just look a lot more like regular America. We saw that to a pretty wide degree as far as abortion rights were concerned, and just bringing women, for example, who had been assaulted and needed some type of reproductive care, women who maybe had some type of, life-threatening issue as it relates to the pregnancy process and couldn't get it because maybe they lived in Georgia or Texas or somewhere where there was an abortion desert. And so I think that's kind of what we're going to be looking for moving forward. In large part, the former Republican groups like Lincoln Project and Republican Voters Against Trump, their ads it wasn't like General John Kelly walking out there or like, John McCain's family or whoever it was. It was like regular Republican voters who were like people, just dudes who were saying like, I voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020. I wouldn't vote for him now because I know that he doesn't respect the Constitution. And it's just regular people. And I think in an era where there's so little trust among politicians and even celebrities, I do think that we're going to see fewer and fewer celebrities and way more regular people offering a permission structure for voters to come to one side or the other. I am being asked about the Alaska House, and no, there has not been a winner called yet, but you can see that Nick Begich is leading Mary Peltola by 10,000 votes right now. So a pretty wide margin, but there are still a number of votes left to be counted, so they haven't called it. This is interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't think this comment was left tongue in cheek, but it's, mark my words, Pornhub bans will be a pivotal issue in 2028. And I kind of don't disagree, because I think that there are governments who are going to see the election of Trump and the election of Democrats to the House and Senate as some sweeping mandate to hand down even their most theocratic edicts. And I do think that we're going to see porn bans in certain places. And I think there's going to be a revolt against that, because this is big government overreach, which is the very thing that the Republican Party used to be predicated on. And so I know it sounds like silly right now, but I think that when you see Pornhub banned in certain places, that is going to have like a reciprocal impact and against the Republicans. And so it's a good call to keep an eye on something like that, which again might sound weird, but like, it's one of the most visited websites in the world. Let's not pretend that like there's some massive countrywide abstention from visiting that website. So it could be. It could be a main issue. I'm also getting the question, did the independent who I interviewed just before the election win in Nebraska? He unfortunately did not, but he came pretty damn close, and that is Dan Osborne in Nebraska. And that was just a few points away. So 7 points away in a deep red Republican state for an independent who had a campaign that was sponsored by neither major political party to come within 70,000 votes of being the next U.S. senator. So that was a bit of a shame. Okay, so here's a really interesting comment that I just got. In a way, it could be a good thing that the Republicans won the House. There's not going to be any. The Dems in the House won't let us let us do it. Excuses. All failures will be theirs solely. So that's certainly the silver lining of this. Look, Trump is not going to be able to nominate the most competent people in the world, because he is just the most competent people are not the people who surround him, and Republicans will fail a lot, and the things that they're going to try to do are largely illegal, and so it is some small silver lining that they won't be able to say, oh well, we would have done it if only those pesky Democrats in the House hadn't stood in our way. Now they own it. Now they have carte blanche. They can move forward. There's nobody else to blame. And so when we have one of the strongest economies in the entire world right now. We have the lowest unemployment rate in half a century. We have the highest stock market in history. We have the most jobs ever added. When Donald Trump is inevitably not going to be able to add jobs at the same clip, or keep the unemployment rate down, or if he imposes his tariffs, costs are going to go up. He's not going to have anybody to blame. And so that is some small silver lining to be able to say, like, this isn't on us. This is on you. You decided that, you wanted to do this. There's nobody else to blame when costs go up or when gas prices go up or whatever it is. And so that is some silver lining there. And I'm getting the comment, Democrats don't need a celebrity. They just need not a corporate Democrat. They need a true populist, but good luck. I agree with that. Democrats, I think that we have seen our last election cycle where Democrats decide to trot out, a pro-billionaire agenda. I think our agenda moving forward is going to be very focused on economic populism and workers' rights, if I had to guess. And it doesn't matter if I have to guess, because I have the opportunity on... Sorry, I have to sneeze. I have the opportunity on my platforms to do that, so I don't need to take my cues from the Democratic Party. And if I think that we need somebody who is an economic populist, or a true populist, workers' rights, somebody who focuses on getting costs down, then that's going to be what I advocate for. And that's the beauty of independent progressive media, is that I'm not waiting to get talking points handed down from like the networks or donors, or I don't take a single dollar of donor money. I never have, and I never will. I just do what I think is right. And I think what's right moving forward is going to be a populist platform where, we do a lot of the things that we already are seeking to do: lower costs, lower healthcare costs, make sure women's reproductive rights are codified into law, raise the minimum wage, make sure there's common sense gun safety reforms. I would love to see healthcare for everybody. I would love to see Medicare for all. Do I think it's going to be an issue in the next campaign? Probably not. And so, like I said before, you have to pick your battles. But regardless, I think a true populist platform is what I would like to see, and I'll use whatever voice I have to advocate for that. Because that's, by the way, what Donald Trump did this election cycle. Is he going to govern that way? Absolutely not. This guy is a billionaire looking out for billionaires. But But that doesn't mean that his messaging wasn't populist, because it absolutely was. The same way it was populist, by the way, in 2016. And yet, what did he do with that populist messaging? He turned it into a presidency where he didn't deliver a middle-class tax cut. He didn't pass an infrastructure law. He didn't get a healthcare plan that was more comprehensive and less expensive. He didn't do any of that. He passed a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. That's it. The sole legislative accomplishment of the Trump presidency from 2017 to 2021 was a tax cut for the richest Americans. 83% of the benefits were conferred to the richest Americans in this country. So this notion that he's going to govern as some populist, we've been here before. We've read this book before. We have seen this movie before. It ain't going to happen. But he was really effective at manipulating his base to believe it. And so here we are, because we live in the media environment that we live in. People are going to believe what Republicans tell them because they hear it over and over and over. And when something is repeated enough, eventually it starts to stick, which, by the way, is why Republicans repeat, build the wall, make America great again, lock her up over and over so it gets seared into your cerebral cortexes. But Democrats have a lot to learn from, and we could do it virtuously, but a lot to learn from the media habits of Republicans. Okay, I know I said that my last question was my last question, but let's see. Let's do one more here. Looks like one more seat just came in. So Republicans just took control of one more seat. Let's find out what that was. Let's see. Wow. I have some news here. Donald Trump is expected to name Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State. How about that? That actually puts Florida's Senate seat up for grabs in 2026. 2026, that map will already have Ohio. Let's go to the Senate map. There will already be a special election in Ohio, which, look, is not well, Sherrod Brown could run again in Ohio in 2 years. And this is somebody who, despite the fact that Donald Trump won Ohio by over 10 points, if I'm not mistaken, so about 11 points, a little over 11 points, Sherrod Brown only lost by 3.8 points, I believe. So Sherrod Brown could run again in 2026, and we could pick off an Ohio Senate seat. And now 2026 could mean that we could pick off Florida, although Florida, that is a big margin to close, 13 points in Florida. But in any case, that is some big news that Marco Rubio will be Secretary of State. I've noticed some people are saying that states are shifting to the right. Illinois, New York, New Jersey. Is it that or a lack of Democratic turnout? I think it's just, I don't think we have to worry about all of a sudden some shift to the right. I think this was an anomaly. It was a response to global inflation, where prices went up everywhere in the whole world and incumbents were punished as the result of it. I think it was a failure of Democrats to have enough time to stand up a campaign that actually resonated with people. Kamala Harris had 100 days. I think what she did in those 100 days was as much as we could have possibly asked for. But the fact is that a lot of people didn't know who she was, and the people who did know who she was heard a lot of the stuff about her from right-wing media. So it was just a bad political environment for Democrats. And I've said this before, and I truly believe that even in the best circumstances, with the best candidate that we could have possibly conjured up, I think we would have lost this election in retrospect. And let me explain this, because I feel like, in case you haven't seen my videos, I do want to explain the economic situation around the world. COVID happens. A lot of the governments infuse money into the populations so that people have something to live on while businesses are shut down, while the economy is shut down. That infusion of cash leads to higher prices. In some instances, it was true inflation. In other instances, it was corporate greed under the pretext of inflation. But either way, prices go up everywhere. For the first time since 1905, so well over 120 years, we are looking at every single governing party either losing seats or getting ousted. There is not a single incumbent party in the world who gained seats. Every single one on planet Earth either lost their spot or lost seats overall in their governing majority. So the U.S. was not spared from that phenomenon. We lost seats here too. The fact is that the majority of Americans do not pay attention to politics, but they do see prices go up in the grocery store, and all they're thinking to themselves is, I cannot afford this. This is too expensive. It's more expensive than it used to be. My wages aren't keeping up with this. I'm going to punish the people in charge. Who are the people in charge? It's the Democrats. As simple as that. It is as simple as that. And again, happened across the entire planet. So I think even with, you can have the most charismatic, articulate candidate on God's green earth. You can have Barack Obama 2.0, and people aren't watching, but they do know that prices are higher. Everybody's going to go to the supermarket, but not everybody's turning on CNN or the New York Times or ABC or CBS to see what's happening in politics. They just know it's more expensive. They're going to cast a ballot for the person who's not in charge, because they want to give somebody else a shot. That's it. It is as simple as that. How quickly do I think the backlash will build against the GOP once they trash the economy? That's the thing. As I said before, I don't think this is some sweeping mandate for Republicans. It doesn't mean that the country has just garnered all these brand new Republican voters. Trump got the same number of votes that he did in 2020. This was a matter of people, again, being too hurt economically to be able to vote for the Democratic Party, which was in power. And I do think that it's not like Trump has some huge mandate or is all of a sudden popular. I just think that people voted because they were hurting from the Democrats and Kamala Harris, and they don't have some allegiance, some like undying allegiance to Donald Trump. And once there is backlash, once there is a cratering of the economy or his tariffs turn things south, I don't think that people are going to feel like they have some allegiance to him. I think they're going to turn on him. This election isn't the result of some wave of support for Trump. It's not that he was affirmatively voted in because people love him. It's that Democrats failed to turn out their base because people were hurting too much to vote for Democrats. And so again, like this isn't some indication that Trump is like some godlike figure in American politics and has some huge mandate. He doesn't. And again, I do think that people are going to turn on him if things go south. So, okay, we will leave it there. I appreciate everybody tuning in. If you are, again, not yet subscribed or don't follow my page, if you're watching on YouTube, if you haven't yet subscribed, on Twitch, if you haven't yet followed, that is the best way to support my work. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, and I won't ever do sponsorships or paid ads. But But that is just following along so that you can catch my live streams is the best way to support me. And if you're not on Twitch, if you're not on YouTube and you want to follow my stuff there, that's a great way to do it as well. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. And let's do one thing.